Sister Yvonne, tell me how your journey to Islam started.
Well, it started in the unlikely surroundings of a Taliban prison in Afghanistan.
You were imprisoned.
Yes, I was held for 11 days by the most evil, brutal regime in the world, according to George Bush and Tony Blair. It was a terrifying experience that I didn't think that I would survive. But throughout the ordeal, I was treated with a courtesy and respect that I hadn't expected.
But how did you end up there?
Well, I had entered the country illegally without a passport and visa. It was the build-up to the war, and I wanted to see what life was like for ordinary Afghan people. And so I couldn't get a visa. They didn't want Westerners into the country. They were on the verge of war, so I sneaked in. I was determined to get in. And
Who were you working for at the time?
I was the chief reporter of the Sunday Express newspaper in London, and I just wanted to find out what life was like for real, ordinary Afghan people.
And then they caught you and held you.
After 2 days, I was rumbled as I headed back. I was done for by a donkey and fell off this donkey and was arrested.
Now, what intrigued you about the Taliban?
I watched them for 11 days, and I saw that their religion was more than just something that was carried out on a Friday. It was part of their life. It was the way they ate, the way they slept, the way they dressed, the way they acted. Everything had an Islamic context. In fact, with the Taliban, it was quite clearly a way of life. And this made me very interested in how it worked. And about 6 days into my captivity, I was asked if I wanted to embrace Islam.
They asked you?
Yes, they invited me, and I just said that I couldn't make such a life-changing decision while I was in prison, but I said, if you let me go, I promise I will read your holy book and any supporting literature. And against all the odds, they let me go a few days later while they still held on to other Westerners. I think it could have been because I had acted like the prisoner from hell. I didn't want I really genuinely thought that they would kill me. And any act of kindness that they showed towards me, I saw that as a trick.
You didn't trust them?
I didn't trust them. I rather foolishly believed George Bush and Tony Blair. I mean, they wouldn't lie, would they? So, so I railed against my captors. I spat at them, I swore at them, I threw things at them. I just wanted to accelerate my demise because I didn't want this ordeal to go on for years, to be tortured or abused. And their response to my very bad behaviour was surprise. And they kept saying, why are you acting like this? You were our guest. And I'm thinking, why are they acting like this? They're supposed to be brutal and evil. But as I say, while they held on to other Westerners, they did release me on humanitarian grounds. And when I returned to London, I thought I made a promise, and I'll keep my word. But I also needed to know about Islam, because I was interested in matters connected with the Middle East and Asia. And I realized just by simple observation of the Taliban that Islam was not something that you picked up and put down again. It was a way of life. And I thought, how can I write with any authority or understanding of the Muslim world unless I know more about this faith?
Prior to your experience with the Taliban, did you have any exposure about Islam? Did you meet Muslims before? I mean, what sort of knowledge did you have about Islam?
What I knew about Islam, you could probably write on the back of a postage stamp. And all of that was wrong anyway. And I began to think about this. I mean, I was brought up in the northeast of England in a white working class community. Nothing as exotic as Islam crossed my horizon at all. So I thought, well, where have I picked up this idea that Islam is violent, brutalizes and oppresses women? And I could trace it back to television, to cartoons, to this slow, subliminal, drip, drip, drip narrative that anything from the East is violent, aggressive and oppressive. And I began to realize that I hadn't picked up a book about Islam or the Muslim world, but I had been subliminally brainwashed to think that this is an area that is violent and oppressive.
So after you came back from Afghanistan, you started fulfilling the promise you made. You started reading books about Islam, or started reading the Quran, or what?
I began reading the Quran, and I was given an English translation by A. Yusuf Ali, which also had additional footnotes, and it had an index in the back. So, being a lifelong promoter of women's rights, I went straight to the back to find the chapter on how to abuse women, how to prevent education, how to force marriage. Of course, I couldn't find anything. And so I started reading it and was just amazed on so many different levels, because the Quran makes it crystal clear that women are equal in spirituality, worth and education. And it is totally gender balanced. It was incredible reading it. So I then began reading supporting literature on women's rights in Islam, and even something like the marriage ceremony that I was told is called the nikah. Women can write out their contract. It's treated like a business arrangement. You write out your hopes, fears, expectations. And I'm thinking, well, this is like the prenuptial agreement that all the Hollywood stars
Exactly.
have drawn up. So many different things, and I was just totally amazed. So this drew me in closer, and what started out as a fulfillment of a promise, an academic exercise, very soon turned into a spiritual journey. I already had a core belief in God. I was a practicing Christian. I went to church maybe twice a month, which in secular Britain is bordering on fanaticism. So I had that belief in God, and reading the Quran was so easy because all of the prophets, all of the messengers, they were all in there with the exception of Muhammad, peace be upon him. And I started then reading about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was an amazing character, the most perfect human that's probably ever walked the earth, and just an amazing role model for people to follow. And then I started to begin to understand why Muslims held him in such reverence and why they got angry and upset if he was ridiculed or his image was portrayed. And so I started reading more about him as well. And
so that was really a process. How long did it take?
About 2 years. And I just thought that I'm still believing in the same God, but this is making just a little more sense than Christianity. And I spoke to various scholars and theologians from the Christian faith as I was moving over, and spoke to a lot of Islamic scholars. Because of my profile through the Taliban experience, everybody was willing to help me, so I had access to some of the finest minds in the Islamic world. But the final realization actually came through speaking to an ordinary brother when he said, why haven't you converted yet? You know, you're so close. And I said, well, I'm still stuck on the Holy Trinity, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Ghost. And he said, look, what relation was John the Baptist to Jesus? And I said, well, they were cousins. And he said, so when John the Baptist prays to God, he would say, Uncle God. And I said, no. I said, that's ridiculous. He said, exactly. He said, and that is how ridiculous the Trinity is, because you cannot mix human with God. And he said, you know, that
very basic.
So basic, so easy to understand. And I thought about it more. And then another friend who was a Christian, I was having this discussion with him, and his friend, who was an atheist, chipped in, and he said, look, if you have 3 messages, 3 post-its stuck on your computer, Judaism, Christianity and Islam, which post-it are you going to take notice of? And I said, well, the most recent. He said, well, that's Islam. And he said, you know, I don't know why you're agonizing over this. and
he solved the problem for you.
Yes. And it's sometimes the answers to life are so simple, the stariness in the face. And so I then took my Shahada. That was on June the 30th, 2003. And the next day I was moving to Qatar to work for Al Jazeera. And I arrived in Qatar as a Muslim, and it was just around the time, you know, Ramadan was a few months away, and I was
so that was to be your first Ramadan.
That was where I had my first Ramadan, and I was so blessed and lucky to be in a Muslim country that isn't afraid to wear its faith on its sleeve. You know, it it
So
was
the fact
wonderful.
that you moved to an Arab country made it probably easy for you in the post-conversion era, because
Yes.
you were well known. I mean, you were in the media, people knew you, so probably your conversion would have caused a stir, wouldn't it?
Yes. So it was so much easier going to live and work in a Muslim country and learn more about the faith, which, as I say, is a way of life. It's not just something that you put on Friday prayers and then forget about for the next 7 days.
Any backlash from your old friends or your old colleagues?
Yes, I mean, some old friends and old colleagues are no longer old friends. You know, they have just not answered my calls or ignored emails, or if they see me, they look the other way. But essentially, I'm still the same person, still have the same sense of humour, and the friends who've stayed with me, you know, have total respect for the faith.
How about the Muslim community in the UK?
Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. People of all cultures and backgrounds have really welcomed me into the Muslim community, especially the women. And, you know, that this is something that I often talk about when I'm addressing women's groups. I'll say, before I was a Muslim, I would have walked into this room and seen those of you wearing the hijabs and thinking, oh, you poor oppressed women. And I said, now I walk into a room full of Muslim women and I'm trying to work out who's the engineer, who's the doctor, who's the psychologist, who's got this profession, who's the backbone of the community. And I said, and you're all mothers, and so proud to be a mother, whereas the status of being a mother in the non-Muslim community is quite different.
Now, how about the community of Muslim converts? Because I hear from some of them that a while after conversion they feel lonely. To what degree is that loneliness?
It can be a lonely existence, but it's something that I'm not entirely convinced about, because I used to hate my own company before I converted to Islam. You know, I was forever at the centre of the parties and always surrounded by people and always out and but once I converted to Islam, I developed a peace that I hadn't known before. And I actually now enjoy my own company and enjoy sitting down and reading. But I can understand the loneliness, because when you convert and the community embraces you, you do become the centre of attention, and everybody loves you, and everybody wants you to do so well, and then life kicks in, and people get involved with their own problems, and because converts aren't part of a big family and quite often abandoned by their own family, they can often feel isolated. And so I can see how it could be tough. It wasn't for me. For me it was, as I say, I actually started to learn to like myself and to have self-respect and self-esteem, which is very important, and I realised before that I didn't esteem.
Any challenges on the professional level? I mean, you were working in the mainstream media before, but now that you've chosen this journey, things are not the same, are they?
No, I was dropped like a hot brick. The BBC referred to me, when I put on a hijab, the BBC referred to me as the former journalist Yvonne Ridley. And
As if you are no longer.
Yeah, it took many letters and various complaints to different departments to say, I am still working as a journalist. How dare you call me the former journalist? And it had been quite difficult, but people are slowly coming around to seeing that I'm still professional. I still care about journalism, and I've changed the style of journalism that I do. I used to do a lot of undercover work, but now I focus mainly on humanitarian efforts, and I still go out into war and conflict zones. And
you told me before earlier that you've just been to Idlib.
Yes, that was quite a tough experience. People there are, this expression, hang on to the rope or hold tight onto the rope of Allah. The people there, they have nothing left but God, and it is their faith which is keeping them going. And to secularists and atheists, I would say, if you don't understand belief, go to Idlib and you will see God is everywhere, because that is what is keeping those people going.
Now, in addition to your conversion to Islam, you opposed the war in Iraq and you stood by the Palestinian people. And these two issues were also sources of trouble.
Well, I have been a staunch supporter of the Palestinians since I was 13, 14, when I first signed a petition, when I first heard about the Palestinians. And I've always been quite vocal about support for the Palestinians, and nobody really took any notice. And then the moment I put on a hijab, oh my word, she's an extremist. And I said, but hold on, I had these views before. It's not me that's changed, it's you that's changed towards me. And the plight of the Palestinians, it doesn't matter whether you're a person of faith or no faith. This is one of the biggest, longest running injustices in the world today. And it blighted the 20th century, and it's running into the 21st century. And it is a real big stain from east to west on our civilization. And, people talk about the siege of Gaza being 12 years. I was on the very first boat to break the siege of Gaza, and about 100,000 Palestinians turned out to see the boats arrive. Why did so many people turn out? Because there hadn't been a boat arriving in Gaza for more than 40 years. This was incredible. And, the boats there were two boats, largely crewed by non-Muslims, a lot of secularists and atheists. And at one point during the dead of night, we were told that we were surrounded by Israeli gunboats. And we thought, you know, this is the end. Our communications were down, all the cell phones, mobile phones, everything was down. We were in the pitch black, bobbling around in the Eastern Mediterranean. And I was with filmmaker Aki Nawaz, who is a practicing Muslim. And I said, it looks as though this is the
end.
The end. And I said, do you think that we'll end up in paradise if we die here? And he said, well, yes. He said, I can't think of a more noble cause than dying for the Palestinians. And I said, you know, you're right. And we both started laughing and at the irony that we were going to be sent to paradise by the Israelis, you know, and so we were laughing and saying, well, bring it on. And that belief in God just made us feel so strong. And
it does miracles.
It really, everybody else was, you know, you could see the fear, and they're looking at us thinking, what are those two daft Muslims laughing about? And it was because we were expecting any minute that that would be the end of this life, but greater things to come.
Did you end up with a Palestinian passport?
I did. I did. Well, it was a miracle. For some reason, the Israeli boats just disappeared and we were able to continue on our journey. We got into Gaza and there were these banners with our faces everywhere, and I just thought, they didn't think we were going to get through. Yeah. These aren't the banners of welcome. These are the martyrs. And so I think a lot of people thought that we were going to be...
If I remember correctly, nobody ever made it after you. I think all the other boats were turned down, or turned back, and or were arrested.
I think a couple did get through after that, but then there was the Mavi Marmara and the flotilla crimes, and it was yes, nobody has been able to get through since, and it was that is probably one of the highlights of my life, and if ever my faith and belief in God was tested, and I think I passed 100%, was that moment on the boat. But after that, we met Ismail Haniyeh, who was then the Prime Minister in Gaza, and he issued us with passports. And I remember saying, at last, I have a Prime Minister of whom I can be proud. And that was a great moment as well. And
a very good note to end on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.